What if I told you that every success, every failure, every moment of happiness or despair in your life can be traced back to a single source, your thoughts? What if the difference between people who achieve extraordinary success and those who remain stuck in mediocrity isn't talent, luck, or circumstances, but simply their ability to control what happens in their mind? Right now, as you listen to these words, thousands of thoughts are racing through your consciousness. Some are empowering you, pushing you toward your goals. Others are sabotaging you, filling you with doubt, fear, and limitation. The question is, who is in control? Are you directing these thoughts, or are they directing you? Here's a disturbing truth that most people never realize. The average person has over 60,000 thoughts per day, and 95% of them are the exact same thoughts they had yesterday. They're living in a mental prison of repetition, running the same programs, getting the same results, wondering why their life never changes. But you're different. You're here because you understand that your mind is either your greatest weapon or your most dangerous enemy. You're here because you're ready to take control, to master the one thing that determines everything else in your life: your thoughts. This audiobook isn't about positive thinking or feel-good motivation. This is about mental mastery. By the time you finish listening, you will have the tools to literally rewire your brain, eliminate self-sabotaging thought patterns, and install the mental programming of peak performers. You will learn to think like the top 1%. Because when you master your mind, you master your life. Chapter 1. The mental battlefield, where your life is won or lost. Every morning, you wake up and enter the most important battlefield of your existence. It's not in the office, not in your relationships, not in the external world. It's in your mind. And on this battlefield, a war is being fought between two forces: the thoughts that empower you and the thoughts that destroy you. Most people lose this war before they even realize it's happening. They let their minds run wild, accepting whatever thoughts show up as truth. They become victims of their own mental chatter, slaves to patterns of thinking that were installed years ago by other people, by society, by their past failures and traumas. But here's what the top performers in every field understand. Your thoughts are not facts. They are not commands you must obey. They are simply mental events that you can observe, evaluate, and choose to accept or reject. The moment you realize this, everything changes. Your brain is essentially a biological computer, and like any computer, it runs on programs. These mental programs, formed by repetitive thought patterns, determine how you see the world, how you respond to challenges, and ultimately, what you achieve. The problem is that most people are running corrupted software, programs filled with bugs of self-doubt, fear, and limitation. Think about this. Every billionaire, every champion athlete, every person who has achieved something extraordinary started with the same basic human brain as you. The difference isn't in their hardware, it's in their software. They've learned to install and run mental programs that serve their success, while most people are stuck running programs designed for failure. The science is clear. Neuroplasticity proves that your brain can be rewired at any age. Every thought you think strengthens certain neural pathways while weakening others. This means that right now, with every thought you choose, you are literally sculpting your brain and determining your future. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to change their lives by changing their actions, their habits, their environment. They focus on the external while ignoring the internal. It's like trying to change what's happening on your computer screen without touching the software that's running underneath. You might get temporary results, but eventually the old programs will take over again. True transformation happens when you go to the source, your thoughts. When you master your mental programming, everything else becomes effortless. Your actions align naturally with your goals because your thoughts are pulling you towards success instead of sabotaging it. Your emotions become stable and powerful because they're rooted in empowering beliefs. Your entire reality shifts because you've changed the lens through which you see the world. This is not metaphysical wishful thinking. This is neuroscience. Every elite performer, whether they realize it or not, has mastered the art of thought control. They've learned to reject thoughts that don't serve their mission and amplify thoughts that drive them toward their goals. They've become the programmers of their own minds instead of victims of random mental activity. The battle for your life is happening right now in your head. The question is, are you going to remain a casualty of unconscious thinking, or are you ready to become a master of your mental domain? Chapter 2. The Hidden Prison of Unconscious Thought Patterns. Right now, you believe you're thinking your own thoughts. You believe you're in control of your mental processes. But what if I told you that 90% of your thoughts aren't actually yours? What if the majority of what goes on in your mind is simply the replay of other people's voices, society's programming, and outdated mental software that hasn't been updated in years? Welcome to the hidden prison that most people live in, without ever realizing they're trapped. It's a prison made not of bars and walls, but of unconscious thought patterns that run automatically, shaping every decision you make, every emotion you feel, and every action you take. These patterns were installed early in your life when your brain was like wet cement, absorbing everything around you. Your parents' beliefs about money, success, and what's possible became your beliefs. Your teacher's limitations became your limitations. Your peers' fears became your fears. Every criticism, every disappointment, every moment of doubt was programmed into your subconscious mind as truth. Here's the terrifying part. These programs run automatically. You don't consciously choose to think thoughts of self-doubt when you're about to take a risk. You don't deliberately sabotage your success when opportunities arise. These patterns activate below the level of consciousness, pulling the strings of your behavior like an invisible puppeteer. The average person has the same conversation with themselves every single day. They wake up with the same worries, the same limiting beliefs, the same mental loops that keep them exactly where they are. They're like actors in a play, reciting the same lines, playing the same character, getting the same result, wondering why their life feels like an endless repetition. But the most dangerous part about these unconscious patterns is that they feel true. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a thought that serves you and a thought that destroys you. It simply runs whatever program has been rehearsed the most. If you've thought, "I'm not good enough," 10,000 times, that neural pathway becomes a superhighway in your brain, activated by the smallest trigger. This is why willpower alone never works. You can consciously decide to change your life, set goals, make plans. But if your unconscious programming is pulling you in the opposite direction, you'll always snap back to your default patterns. It's like trying to drive forward while someone else controls the steering wheel. The programming runs so deep that it affects not just what you think, but how you think. Some people are programmed for scarcity thinking, always focused on what they don't have, what could go wrong, what they might lose. Others are programmed for abundance thinking, naturally seeing opportunities, possibilities, and solutions. Same situation, completely different mental processing, totally different results. Consider this. Every self-sabotaging behavior in your life can be traced back to an unconscious thought pattern. Procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's a program running the belief that you're not capable or that failure is too painful to risk. Settling for less than you deserve isn't humility. It's programming that says you're not worthy of more. Avoiding challenges isn't prudence. It's programming that equates discomfort with danger. The good news is that once you become aware of these patterns, you can change them. But awareness isn't enough. You need to actively deprogram the old patterns and consciously install new ones. You need to become the hacker of your own mind, identifying malicious software and replacing it with programs designed for success. This process requires brutal honesty about the thoughts that currently run your life. You have to examine the mental habits you've been unconscious of, the beliefs you've never questioned, the internal dialogue that's been shaping your reality. Most people avoid this work because it's uncomfortable to realize how much of their thinking isn't actually their own. But here's what happens when you break free from unconscious programming. You discover who you really are underneath all the borrowed thoughts and inherited limitations. You realize that the voice of doubt in your head isn't your voice at all, but an echo from your past. You understand that your true self is far more capable, creative, and powerful than your programming has allowed you to believe. The prison of unconscious thought patterns has kept you small, safe, and predictable. But the key to your cell has always been in your hand. It's time to unlock the door and step into the freedom of conscious thought mastery. Chapter 3. The Neuroscience of Mental Transformation. Your brain is not fixed. This single scientific fact should revolutionize how you think about your potential, your limitations, and your ability to change. For centuries, scientists believed that adult brains were unchangeable, that you were stuck with whatever neural patterns you developed early in life. That belief was wrong, and its correction has opened the door to unlimited human potential. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself throughout your lifetime, means that every thought you think is literally reshaping your neural architecture. When you think a thought, neurons fire together. And as neuroscientists say, neurons that fire together wire together. Repeat a thought pattern enough times, and you create a neural superhighway that makes that pattern automatic. This is happening in your brain right now. As you listen to these words, new neural connections are forming. Existing ones are strengthening, and your brain is physically changing. The question is, what kind of changes are you creating? Are you reinforcing patterns that serve your success? Or are you strengthening pathways that keep you trapped in limitation? Here's what most people don't understand. Your brain doesn't care whether a thought pattern helps you or hurts you. It simply makes whatever you practice most often the easiest to access. If you practice worry, worry becomes automatic. If you practice confidence, confidence becomes automatic. Your brain is like an incredibly sophisticated learning machine that's always asking, what should I get better at? And whatever you feed it most consistently, that's what it optimizes for. The implications of this are staggering. It means that people who seem naturally confident, naturally optimistic, or naturally successful aren't born that way. They've simply, either consciously or unconsciously, practiced thought patterns that create those qualities. Their brains have been shaped by repetitive mental training, just like an athlete's body is shaped by repetitive physical training. But here's where it gets even more powerful. You can accelerate this process through conscious effort. When you deliberately choose empowering thoughts and reject limiting ones, you're not just hoping for change, you're engineering it. You're literally rewiring your brain for success. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and conscious decision-making, can override the automatic programs running in your limbic system. This means that even if you have decades of negative programming, you can install new programs that are stronger, more powerful, and more aligned with your goals. Research shows that it takes approximately 66 days to form a new habit, but the neural changes begin immediately. Every time you catch a negative thought and replace it with an empowering one, you're weakening the old neural pathway and strengthening a new one. It's like creating a new trail through a forest. At first, the old path is clear and easy to follow, while your new path is barely visible. But with consistent use, your new path becomes the superhighway, while the old one gets overgrown and forgotten. The key is understanding that your brain operates on the principle of use it or lose it. Neural pathways that aren't used begin to weaken and eventually disappear. This means that every day you don't think limiting thoughts, those pathways get weaker. Every day you do think empowering thoughts, those pathways get stronger. This process isn't just about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about strategic mental programming based on neuroscience. When you combine emotional intensity with repetitive thought patterns, you create what scientists call state-dependent learning. The brain remembers information more powerfully when it's associated with strong emotions, which is why your most limiting beliefs often stem from emotional experiences. But you can use this same mechanism to install empowering beliefs. When you think thoughts of success, capability, and possibility while in a state of excitement and certainty, you're programming those thoughts at a much deeper level than simple intellectual understanding. The science also shows us that visualization activates the same neural networks as actual experience. When you mentally rehearse success, your brain can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. This is why athletes who visualize their performance often improve as much as those who physically practice. Your brain is the most sophisticated piece of technology in the known universe, and you have complete access to its programming. Every successful person has learned to leverage neuroplasticity, whether they understand the science or not. They've discovered how to break old patterns and install new ones, how to turn positive thoughts into automatic responses, and how to make success feel natural instead of forced. The transformation of your mind isn't a mystical process. It's a scientific one. And now that you understand the mechanics, you can engineer the exact mental changes you want to create. Chapter 4. The 4 Pillars of Thought Mastery. Mastering your thoughts isn't about suppressing negative thinking or forcing yourself to be positive. It's about developing a systematic approach to mental management that allows you to consciously choose the thoughts that serve your highest potential while eliminating those that sabotage your success. This system rests on 4 fundamental pillars that, when mastered, give you complete control over your mental domain. The first pillar is awareness. Before you can control your thoughts, you must become aware of them. This sounds simple, but it's actually the most challenging aspect of thought mastery, because most people live their entire lives unconscious of their mental activity. Thoughts arise and disappear so quickly that they barely register in conscious awareness, yet they influence every decision you make. Developing thought awareness requires you to step back from your mental activity and observe it like a scientist studying a specimen. You need to become the watcher of your thoughts rather than being consumed by them. This means creating mental distance between the thinker and the thoughts, recognizing that you are not your thoughts, you are the consciousness that observes them. Practice this throughout your day. Randomly stop and ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Not what you should be thinking, not what you want to be thinking, but what is actually going through your mind in this moment. You'll be amazed at how often you discover negative, unproductive, or completely random mental chatter running in the background of your consciousness. The second pillar is interruption. Once you become aware of unproductive thought patterns, you need the ability to interrupt them before they spiral out of control. Every destructive thought pattern, whether it's worry, self-doubt, or negativity, follows a predictable sequence. It starts with a trigger, builds momentum through repetition, and eventually dominates your mental state. The key is catching these patterns early in their development. Think of negative thoughts like a small fire. If you catch it when it's just a spark, you can easily extinguish it. But if you let it burn unchecked, it becomes an inferno that's much harder to control. Interruption techniques include pattern breaks, physical movement, conscious breathing, or simply saying, "Stop," to yourself with authority. The most effective interruption technique is what I call the circuit breaker. The moment you recognize a destructive thought pattern beginning, you immediately engage in a predetermined physical action. This could be snapping your fingers, taking 3 deep breaths, or even standing up and walking around. The physical action breaks the neural pattern before it gains momentum. The third pillar is redirection. Interrupting negative thoughts is only half the battle. Nature abhors a vacuum, and your mind abhors an empty thought space. If you stop a negative thought without replacing it with something else, your brain will often default back to the same pattern. This is why redirection is crucial. Redirection means having an arsenal of empowering thoughts ready to deploy whenever you interrupt a limiting pattern. These aren't generic positive affirmations, but specific, personally meaningful thoughts that align with your goals and values. They should be thoughts that generate positive emotions and forward momentum. For example, if you catch yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough for this opportunity," you don't just stop that thought. You immediately redirect to something like, "I have unique value to offer, and I'm constantly growing in my capabilities." The new thought should feel authentic and believable to you, not like empty cheerleading. The fourth pillar is reinforcement. The thoughts you reinforce become the thoughts that dominate your mental landscape. Reinforcement means consciously choosing to dwell on, elaborate on, and emotionally invest in thoughts that serve your success. Most people accidentally reinforce their limiting thoughts by giving them attention and emotional energy, while barely acknowledging their empowering thoughts. Reinforcement requires that you become deliberate about which thoughts you feed and which thoughts you starve. When an empowering thought arises, you pause and really experience it. You add detail to it. You imagine what it would feel like if it were completely true. You let it generate positive emotions. You give it the mental energy it needs to become a dominant pattern. This is not about lying to yourself or ignoring reality. It's about being strategic about where you direct your mental energy. You can acknowledge challenges and problems while choosing not to mentally rehearse worst-case scenarios. You can be realistic about current circumstances while reinforcing thoughts about your ability to improve those circumstances. The 4 pillars work together as an integrated system. Awareness allows you to catch both empowering and limiting thoughts as they arise. Interruption stops destructive patterns before they gain momentum. Redirection ensures you're filling your mind with thoughts that serve you. Reinforcement makes empowering thoughts stronger and more automatic over time. Mastering these 4 pillars transforms you from a victim of random mental activity into the conscious architect of your mental state. You become someone who thinks on purpose instead of by accident. Someone who chooses thoughts strategically instead of accepting whatever shows up in your mind. This is the foundation of all mental mastery. And once you build these skills, every other aspect of thought control becomes possible. Chapter 5. Breaking Free from Mental Prisons. Most people live their entire lives in mental prisons they've built for themselves, with bars made of limiting beliefs and walls constructed from past failures. These prisons are so familiar, so much a part of their identity, that they mistake them for reality. They believe their limitations are facts, rather than recognizing them as self-imposed constraints that can be dismantled and discarded. The most dangerous aspect of mental prisons is that they're invisible to the people trapped inside them. You can't escape a prison you don't realize you're in. These limitations masquerade as truth, presenting themselves as rational assessments of reality, rather than revealing themselves as the mental constructs they actually are. Every limitation you believe about yourself started as a thought. Someone told you that you weren't smart enough, talented enough, or worthy enough, and you accepted that thought as truth. Over time, through repetition and reinforcement, that single thought became a belief, then a conviction, and finally, an unquestionable part of your identity. But here's what you must understand. Every mental prison was built one thought at a time, and it can be dismantled the same way. The first step to freedom is recognizing the bars of your particular prison. These often show up as automatic thoughts that begin with phrases like, "I can't," "I'm not," "I'll never," or "I always." They present themselves as facts about your nature or your circumstances, but they're actually just mental habits that have been practiced so often they feel true. Listen to your internal dialogue for patterns of limitation. Notice how certain thoughts arise automatically when you consider taking risks, pursuing opportunities, or stepping outside your comfort zone. These thoughts aren't protecting you from danger. They're protecting you from growth. They're the prison guards of your potential. One of the most common mental prisons is the not enough prison. This is where people believe they're not smart enough, not talented enough, not experienced enough, or not worthy enough to achieve their goals. They've been programmed to focus on what they lack rather than what they possess. They've turned their attention into a deficit-finding machine that always produces evidence of their inadequacy. Another prevalent prison is the what-if prison, where people torment themselves with endless scenarios of potential failure, rejection, or catastrophe. They've trained their minds to be threat detection systems, scanning the future for every possible danger and using those imagined threats to justify inaction in the present. The "I should" prison traps people in endless cycles of guilt and obligation, where they're constantly measuring themselves against standards they never consciously chose. They live their lives trying to meet expectations imposed by others, never stopping to question whether those expectations serve their authentic goals and values. Breaking free requires more than just recognizing these patterns. You need to actively challenge the thoughts that create your limitations. This means becoming a detective of your own mind, investigating the evidence behind your beliefs about what's possible for you. When a limiting thought arises, immediately ask yourself, is this absolutely true? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. Your limitations are usually generalizations based on limited past experience, other people's opinions, or fears about hypothetical futures. They're not facts. They're interpretations that you've mistaken for reality. The next question to ask is, how do I feel when I believe this thought? Usually, limiting thoughts generate emotions of fear, sadness, anger, or resignation. They drain your energy and motivation. They make you feel small and powerless. This emotional response is your internal guidance system, telling you that these thoughts don't serve your highest good. Then ask, who would I be without this thought? Imagine yourself completely free from the limitation you've been carrying. What would you attempt if you didn't have this belief holding you back? How would you feel? What would become possible? This exercise begins to show you that your identity without limitations is far more powerful and creative than your current self-concept. Finally, find evidence that contradicts your limiting belief. Your brain has been selectively filtering information to support your limitations. But there's always evidence on the other side, if you're willing to look for it. You've succeeded at difficult things before. You've overcome challenges that once seemed impossible. You've grown and learned, and adapted in ways that your past self couldn't have imagined. The process of mental prison breaking isn't comfortable. These limitations have been part of your identity for so long that releasing them can feel like losing yourself. But what you're actually losing is a false, contracted version of yourself that was never real to begin with. What you're gaining is access to your authentic power and potential. Every mental prison has a key, and that key is always in your hand. It's your willingness to question thoughts that have gone unquestioned, to challenge beliefs that have gone unchallenged, and to step into the uncertainty of unlimited possibility. The door has been unlocked all along. The only question is, are you ready to walk through it? Chapter 6. Emotional thought, hijacking, and how to prevent it. Your emotions are not your enemies, but they can become the greatest threat to your mental mastery if you don't understand how they interact with your thoughts. Most people believe that emotions just happen to them, that they're victims of their feelings, powerless to control the emotional storms that sweep through their minds. This belief turns them into emotional puppets, dancing to whatever tune their feelings play. But here's what emotional masters understand. Emotions don't create thoughts. Thoughts create emotions. Every feeling you experience is preceded by a thought, whether you're conscious of it or not. This means that by controlling your thoughts, you gain control over your emotional state. You become the conductor of your emotional orchestra instead of being dragged around by runaway feelings. The problem is that most people have this relationship backwards. They let their emotions dictate their thoughts, which creates more emotions, which influence more thoughts, creating a downward spiral that can destroy their mental state in minutes. One moment of anger generates thoughts of revenge and injustice, which creates more anger, which generates more hostile thoughts, until they're completely consumed by rage over something that may have been relatively minor. This is emotional thought hijacking, and it's one of the most destructive forces in human psychology. When you're in the grip of a strong emotion, your rational thinking brain essentially goes offline. The emotional centers of your brain flood your system with chemicals that make logical thinking nearly impossible. You become temporarily insane, making decisions and saying things that you'll later regret when you return to rational thought. Fear is perhaps the most dangerous emotion when it comes to thought hijacking. Fear thoughts multiply like cancer cells, each one spawning 10 more. You start with one worry about a presentation tomorrow, and within minutes your mind has constructed elaborate scenarios of public humiliation, career destruction, and social rejection. The original fear was reasonable and potentially helpful, but the thought spiral it created is completely destructive. Anger works the same way. Someone cuts you off in traffic, which triggers the thought, "That person is disrespecting me," which generates anger, which creates thoughts about getting revenge or proving your worth, which increases the anger until you're having an emotional meltdown over a 30-second interaction with a stranger you'll never see again. Sadness and depression operate through similar mechanisms. One negative thought about your circumstances triggers feelings of hopelessness, which generate more negative thoughts about your future, your worth, and your options, which deepen the sadness until you're trapped in a mental quicksand of despair. The key to preventing emotional hijacking is intervention at the thought level before emotions gain momentum. This requires developing what I call emotional early warning systems. You need to become so attuned to your thought patterns that you can catch destructive emotional sequences before they spiral out of control. The first warning sign is usually a subtle shift in your mental focus. Suddenly, your attention gets pulled toward problems, threats, or negatives that weren't bothering you moments before. This shift in focus is often so automatic that you don't notice it happening. But it's the first domino that starts the emotional avalanche. The second warning sign is the emergence of specific thought categories. Fear-based thinking often includes words like, "what if," "might happen," or "could go wrong." Anger-based thinking includes words like, "should," "unfair," or "disrespect." Depression-based thinking includes words like, "never," "always," "hopeless," or "pointless." Learning to recognize these linguistic patterns gives you early detection of emotional hijacking attempts. The third warning sign is physical sensation. Emotions create immediate changes in your body before you're consciously aware of them. Fear might show up as tension in your stomach or chest. Anger might appear as heat in your face or clenched fists. Sadness might manifest as heaviness in your chest or shoulders. Your body often knows what emotion is coming before your mind does. Once you detect the early warning signs, you have a narrow window of opportunity to prevent the hijacking. This is where the 4 pillars of thought mastery become critical. You must immediately interrupt the thought pattern that's feeding the unwanted emotion. Redirect to thoughts that generate the emotional state you want and reinforce those new thoughts until they dominate your mental landscape. The most powerful technique for emotional regulation through thought control is what I call emotional state stacking. Instead of trying to eliminate negative emotions, you deliberately build positive emotional states by thinking thoughts that generate the feelings you want to experience. If you want confidence, you think thoughts that make you feel capable and powerful. If you want peace, you think thoughts that connect you to safety and acceptance. If you want motivation, you think thoughts that remind you of your compelling goals and reasons for achieving them. This isn't about denying reality or pretending problems don't exist. It's about choosing which emotional state will serve you best in handling whatever challenges you face. A confident state will help you solve problems more effectively than a fearful state. A peaceful state will help you think more clearly than an agitated state. A motivated state will help you take action more powerfully than a depressed state. Remember, your emotions are not happening to you. They're being created by you through your thought choices. Every feeling is feedback about the quality of your thinking. Negative emotions are warning signals that your thoughts have drifted into unproductive territory. Positive emotions are confirmation that your thoughts are aligned with your well-being and success. When you master emotional thought control, you become emotionally invincible. External circumstances lose their power to determine your internal state. Other people's behavior stops controlling your feelings. You become the source of your own emotional experience, which means you can feel however you choose to feel, whenever you choose to feel it. This is not emotional suppression or denial. This is emotional mastery through thought mastery. And once you develop this skill, you'll wonder how you ever survived without it. Chapter 7. Installing success programming in your mental operating system. Your mind operates like a sophisticated computer, running programs that determine how you process information, make decisions, and respond to challenges. Right now, you're running mental software that was installed years ago, much of it without your conscious consent. The question is this software helping you succeed, or is it keeping you trapped in patterns of limitation and mediocrity? Most people go through their entire lives running the same basic mental operating system they acquired in childhood. They process opportunities through programs of fear and doubt. They handle challenges through programs of overwhelm and avoidance. They approach goals through programs of self-sabotage and excuse-making. Then they wonder why they can't break through to the next level of success. But elite performers in every field have learned to consciously install mental programs that serve their ambitions. They've identified the thought patterns, beliefs, and mental strategies of peak performers and deliberately programmed those patterns into their own minds. They've upgraded their mental software to run success algorithms instead of failure routines. The first step in installing success programming is identifying the specific mental operating systems you want to run. This isn't about vague concepts like thinking positive. It's about defining the exact thought patterns, decision-making processes, and mental habits that will move you toward your specific goals. For example, if your goal is to build a successful business, you need to install entrepreneurial programming. This includes thoughts that scan for opportunities instead of problems, beliefs that view challenges as puzzles to solve rather than threats to avoid, and mental habits that prioritize value creation over comfort preservation. You need programs that make risk-taking feel exciting instead of terrifying, that make learning from failure feel valuable instead of shameful. If your goal is to develop unshakable confidence, you need to install confidence programming. This includes thoughts that focus on your strengths and capabilities rather than your weaknesses and limitations, beliefs about your worthiness to succeed and deserve good things, and mental habits that interpret challenges as growth opportunities rather than threats to your self-image. If your goal is to achieve peak physical fitness, you need to install fitness programming. This includes thoughts that make healthy choices feel automatic instead of forced, beliefs about your body's ability to transform and improve, and mental habits that prioritize long-term health over short-term comfort. The key insight is that every goal requires its own unique mental programming. You can't achieve extraordinary results while running ordinary mental software. The programs that got you to your current level of success are not the same programs that will take you to the next level. Upgrading your external circumstances requires first upgrading your internal programming. Success programming installation works through a process called mental modeling. You identify someone who has already achieved what you want to achieve, and you study not just what they do, but how they think. You reverse engineer their mental operating system, and then install those same programs in your own mind. This goes far deeper than copying their strategies or tactics. Anyone can copy external behaviors, but without the underlying mental programming that drives those behaviors, the results will be temporary at best. You need to install the beliefs, thought patterns, and mental habits that make successful behaviors feel natural and automatic. The installation process requires 3 phases: deletion, downloading, and debugging. First, you must delete the old programs that conflict with your success. If you want to install confidence programming but you're still running self-doubt software, the 2 programs will conflict and cause system crashes. You can't run contradictory programs simultaneously without creating internal conflict and inconsistent results. Deletion means identifying and consciously rejecting thoughts, beliefs, and mental habits that don't serve your goals. Every time you catch yourself running old programming, you immediately stop the process and refuse to continue. This isn't about fighting or resisting the old patterns. It's about simply choosing not to engage with them. The downloading phase involves consciously installing new mental programs through repetitive practice. You identify the exact thoughts, beliefs, and mental habits you want to run, and you practice them deliberately until they become automatic. This is like installing new software on your computer through repeated use until the new programs become your default way of operating. But here's where most people make a critical mistake. They try to download new programming without sufficient emotional intensity. Your brain learns most powerfully when information is combined with strong positive emotions. If you practice new thought patterns while feeling bored, doubtful, or indifferent, the programming won't install properly. You need to practice your new mental programming while in states of excitement, certainty, and passion. When you think thoughts of success while feeling absolutely certain they're true, when you rehearse confidence while feeling genuinely powerful, when you imagine your goals while feeling completely deserving of achieving them, you're installing programming at the deepest possible level. The debugging phase involves testing your new programming under real-world conditions and making adjustments as needed. Even the best mental programs need fine-tuning when they encounter actual challenges and circumstances. You need to be prepared to modify your programming based on feedback from your results. This might mean adjusting your confidence programming if you discover it makes you overconfident in certain situations. It might mean refining your opportunity recognition programming if you find it makes you chase too many options without focusing deeply on anyone. It might mean updating your goal achievement programming if you realize your timelines are unrealistic or your strategies need modification. The most important aspect of success programming is consistency. Your brain doesn't care if you practice empowering thoughts occasionally while practicing limiting thoughts most of the time. It will always default to whatever programming gets the most repetition and emotional reinforcement. You need to make conscious mental programming a daily practice, not a sporadic activity. This means setting aside time each day to deliberately practice your new thought patterns, to rehearse your success programming, and to emotionally reinforce the mental habits you want to make automatic. Most people spend more time programming their phones than programming their minds, then wonder why their external results don't match their internal potential. Remember, you're not trying to become someone else through this programming installation. You're trying to become the best version of yourself, the version that exists when limiting programming isn't holding you back. Success programming doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you really are underneath all the mental software that's been limiting your expression. When you master the art of conscious programming installation, you become the architect of your own mental operating system. You stop being a victim of random mental programming and become the conscious designer of your own thought patterns, beliefs, and mental habits. You become someone who thinks on purpose, believes strategically, and succeeds systematically. Chapter 8. Advanced Mental Techniques for Thought Mastery. Once you've mastered the basics of thought control, you're ready to explore advanced techniques that separate mental masters from casual practitioners. These aren't simple tricks or quick fixes, but sophisticated mental technologies that can transform your mind into a precision instrument for achieving any goal you set. The first advanced technique is called mental time travel. Most people live trapped in a narrow slice of present moment awareness, reacting to immediate circumstances, without perspective on the larger timeline of their lives. Mental masters have learned to consciously shift their perspective across time, thinking from their future successful self backward to their present situation. When you think from your future self, everything changes. Problems that seem overwhelming from your current perspective become stepping stones when viewed from the vantage point of someone who has already overcome them. Decisions that feel impossible become obvious when you consider what your successful future self would choose. Obstacles that appear insurmountable become temporary challenges when you remember that your future self has already navigated past them. Practice this. Before making any important decision, mentally transport yourself 5 years into the future and imagine you've achieved all your major goals. From that perspective of success and wisdom, look back at your current situation and ask, what would I do in this situation, knowing what I know now? The answer you receive will often be dramatically different from what your present moment thinking would suggest. The second advanced technique is multi-dimensional thinking. Most people think in linear chains of cause and effect, considering only immediate consequences and obvious connections. Mental masters think in complex systems, seeing multiple layers of interconnection and considering second, third, and fourth-order effects of their thoughts and actions. Multidimensional thinking means considering not just what a thought or decision will create directly, but what it will create indirectly through its impact on your emotional state, your relationships, your reputation, your habits, and your identity. It means thinking about how today's thoughts will influence tomorrow's opportunities, next month's circumstances, and next year's possibilities. For example, when you choose thoughts of gratitude instead of complaints, you're not just changing your immediate mood. You're rewiring your brain to notice positive aspects of your life, which changes how others perceive and respond to you, which creates more positive experiences to be grateful for, which reinforces the gratitude programming, which improves your overall life satisfaction and performance in ways that compound over time. The third advanced technique is reality architecture. This is the ability to consciously design the mental models and frameworks through which you interpret your experiences. Most people inherit their frameworks from their culture, family, and past experiences, then spend their lives seeing the world through those inherited lenses, without ever questioning whether those perspectives serve their goals. Reality architecture means consciously choosing the frameworks that generate the most empowering interpretations of your circumstances. If you're facing a business challenge, you can choose to see it through a framework of threat and survival, or through a framework of opportunity and growth. The facts may be the same, but the meaning you extract and the responses you generate will be completely different. Master this by asking yourself, what framework would I need to adopt to see this situation as the best thing that could happen to me right now? Then deliberately practice thinking about your circumstances through that lens until it becomes natural. You're not lying to yourself or ignoring problems. You're choosing the interpretation that best serves your ability to respond effectively. The fourth advanced technique is quantum thinking. This involves holding multiple perspectives simultaneously, rather than locking into a single point of view. Most people think in binary terms. Something is either good or bad, right or wrong, possible or impossible. Quantum thinking allows you to explore the truth in multiple contradictory perspectives at the same time. For instance, you can simultaneously hold the perspective that your current situation is perfect for your growth and that you're committed to changing it. You can believe that you're complete and worthy exactly as you are and that you're dedicated to continuous improvement. You can accept your present circumstances fully and maintain unwavering commitment to creating better ones. This eliminates the internal conflict that most people experience when they try to improve their lives while judging their current situations as inadequate. Quantum thinking allows you to embrace what is while working toward what could be, without the mental stress of fighting against reality. The fifth advanced technique is attention hacking. Your attention is your most valuable resource, and most people allow it to be hijacked by whatever is loudest, most urgent, or most emotionally charged. Mental masters have learned to consciously direct their attention like a laser beam, focusing it precisely where it will produce the most valuable results. Attention hacking involves creating internal systems that automatically filter out mental noise and focus your thinking on what matters most. This includes developing the ability to think about what you want instead of what you don't want, to focus on solutions instead of problems, and to direct mental energy toward opportunities instead of obstacles. Practice this by regularly asking yourself, what deserves my mental attention right now? Then, deliberately redirect your thinking to whatever will best serve your goals and well-being. Your thoughts will follow your attention, and your results will follow your thoughts. The sixth advanced technique is emotional state engineering. Instead of waiting for circumstances to determine how you feel, you learn to consciously generate any emotional state you need to perform at your best. This involves understanding the specific thought patterns that create different emotions and being able to access those patterns on demand. Need confidence for an important presentation? You know exactly which thoughts to think to generate unshakable certainty. Need creativity for problem solving? You have specific mental processes that shift your brain into innovative thinking modes. Need persistence for long-term projects? You can access thought patterns that make dedication feel natural and rewarding. This doesn't mean forcing fake emotions or pretending to feel something you don't. It means understanding that emotions are created by thoughts. And since you can choose your thoughts, you can consciously create the emotional states that best serve your goals. The seventh advanced technique is mental simulation and rehearsal. Elite athletes have long understood the power of mental practice, but this principle applies to every area of life. You can mentally rehearse not just physical actions, but mental responses, emotional states, and decision-making processes. Before entering any challenging situation, mentally rehearse exactly how you want to think, feel, and respond. Practice the specific thoughts you'll use to maintain confidence under pressure. Rehearse the mental strategies you'll employ when facing obstacles or setbacks. Pre-experience success so thoroughly in your mind that when it happens in reality, it feels familiar and natural. These advanced techniques aren't just intellectual concepts to understand. They're mental technologies to master through practice. Each one will dramatically expand your ability to think strategically, respond effectively, and create the results you want in your life. The difference between basic and advanced thought mastery is the difference between someone who occasionally chooses better thoughts and someone who has transformed their entire mental operating system into a precision instrument for success. Chapter 9. Defeating the inner critic and mental sabotage. There's a voice inside your head that's not your friend. It whispers doubts when you're about to take risks. It reminds you of past failures when you're pursuing new opportunities. It questions your worthiness when success is within reach. This voice has been with you so long that you might mistake it for your own thoughts, but it's actually your inner critic, and it's one of the most destructive forces standing between you and your potential. The inner critic is not your wisdom or intuition trying to protect you. It's a collection of borrowed voices from your past. Internalized criticism that has become a permanent resident in your mind. It's your third-grade teacher who said you weren't smart enough. Your parent who said you'd never amount to anything. Your ex-partner who said you weren't good enough, all combined into a sophisticated system of mental sabotage. This voice has one primary function: to keep you small, safe, and predictable. It operates on the primitive assumption that anything new or challenging is dangerous. So it tries to talk you out of growth, risk-taking, or change. It would rather see you miserable in familiar circumstances than happy in unknown territory. The inner critic is particularly insidious because it masquerades as rational thinking. It presents its limitations as logical assessments of reality. It doesn't say, "Don't try because I'm scared." It says, "Don't try because you'll probably fail," or "Don't try because you don't have enough experience," or "Don't try because people will judge you." It wraps fear in the language of reason. Most people spend their entire lives in dialogue with this voice, negotiating with it, trying to convince it that they're worthy of success, arguing with its assessments of their capabilities. But here's what you must understand. You cannot reason with the inner critic because it's not operating from reason. It's operating from fear. And fear is immune to logic. The inner critic feeds on attention. Every time you engage with its arguments, every time you try to prove it wrong, every time you debate its assessments, you're strengthening its presence in your mind. The more attention you give it, the louder it becomes. The more you fight it, the more powerful it grows. The first step in defeating the inner critic is recognizing when it's speaking. This voice has specific characteristics that distinguish it from genuine wisdom or realistic assessment. The inner critic always speaks in absolutes. You always fail. You never succeed. You can't do anything right. It catastrophizes outcomes. If you fail at this, you'll lose everything. It personalizes external circumstances. They rejected your proposal because you're not good enough. The inner critic also has specific timing. It tends to speak up most loudly when you're about to do something important, scary, or outside your comfort zone. It's suspiciously quiet when you're playing small or staying safe. If a voice in your head is trying to talk you out of growth, challenge, or opportunity, there's a good chance it's the inner critic rather than genuine wisdom. Once you recognize the inner critic's voice, the next step is refusing to engage with it. This doesn't mean fighting it or arguing with it. Fighting the inner critic is like fighting quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Instead, you learn to observe its chatter without taking it seriously, like listening to a radio station you don't particularly care about. The most powerful technique for dealing with the inner critic is called voice labeling. When you notice critical self-talk beginning, you immediately label it. That's the inner critic speaking. This simple act of labeling creates psychological distance between you and the voice. You stop identifying with the criticism and start observing it as a mental phenomenon that's happening to you rather than as truth about you. You can even give your inner critic a name and personality. Some people imagine it as a cranky old relative who complains about everything. Others visualize it as a frightened child who's trying to prevent any possibility of pain or rejection. By externalizing the voice and giving it a character, you stop taking its assessments personally. Another effective technique is thank and dismiss. When the inner critic speaks up, you can actually thank it for trying to protect you, acknowledge its concern, and then firmly dismiss it. Thanks for the warning, but I've got this handled. This approach recognizes that the inner critic usually has some positive intention, even if its methods are destructive, while still maintaining your authority over your mental space. The inner critic also engages in what psychologists call cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that make situations seem worse than they are. Learning to recognize these distortions helps you see when your thinking has been hijacked by critical programming. Mind reading is when the inner critic claims to know what others are thinking about you, usually negative thoughts. Everyone thinks you're incompetent. Fortune telling is when it predicts negative futures, as if they're certain you're going to fail and embarrass yourself. All or nothing thinking presents situations as completely good or completely bad, with no middle ground. If you make one mistake, you're a complete failure. Catastrophizing involves imagining the worst possible outcomes and treating them as likely. If you speak up in the meeting, everyone will think you're stupid, and you'll get fired, and you'll never find another job. Personalization makes you responsible for everything negative that happens around you. The project failed because I'm not good enough. When you catch these distortions, immediately challenge them with questions. Is this thought absolutely true? What evidence do I have that supports or contradicts this? What would I tell a friend who was thinking this about themselves? What's a more balanced way to look at this situation? The ultimate goal isn't to eliminate the inner critic entirely, which is probably impossible, but to reduce it from a dominant voice that controls your decisions to a background whisper that you occasionally notice but don't take seriously. You want to reach the point where the inner critic's opinions carry no more weight than the opinions of a stranger on the street. Remember, the inner critic is not the voice of truth or wisdom. It's the voice of fear, trying to keep you trapped in limitation. Every successful person has learned to act in spite of this voice, not because they eliminated it, but because they refuse to let it make their decisions for them. Your real voice, your authentic self, is the one that encourages growth, celebrates progress, and believes in your potential. That's the voice you want to amplify and follow. That's the voice that will lead you to the life you actually want to live. Chapter 10. Building unshakable mental resilience. Mental resilience is not about being invulnerable to life's challenges. It's about developing the ability to be knocked down by circumstances and get back up stronger than before. It's about training your mind to extract wisdom from adversity, to find opportunity hidden within obstacles, and to maintain your core sense of purpose even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. Most people have fragile mental resilience because they've built their psychological foundation on unstable ground. They've tied their self-worth to external achievements, their happiness to external circumstances, and their sense of security to external validation. When those external supports inevitably shift or disappear, their entire mental structure collapses. True mental resilience comes from building your psychological foundation on internal bedrock that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. This means developing a sense of self that exists independently of your achievements, a source of happiness that comes from within rather than from outside circumstances, and a security that's rooted in your own capabilities rather than in external guarantees. The first pillar of mental resilience is philosophical clarity. You need a clear understanding of what you stand for, what you value, and what gives your life meaning that goes beyond temporary circumstances. When you know your core values and live by them consistently, external setbacks become temporary inconveniences rather than threats to your identity. Most people have never consciously chosen their values or examined their philosophy of life. They've inherited beliefs about what matters from their family, culture, and society without ever questioning whether those beliefs serve their authentic self. This leaves them vulnerable to any challenge to their inherited belief system. Building philosophical clarity means asking yourself fundamental questions. What do you believe about the nature of life, success, failure, and human potential? What principles do you want to guide your decisions regardless of circumstances? What kind of person do you want to be independent of what you achieve or accumulate? What would make your life meaningful even if you never achieved your current goals? The second pillar of mental resilience is emotional sovereignty. This means taking complete responsibility for your emotional state regardless of what's happening around you. Most people believe that circumstances create emotions, that other people make them angry, that events make them sad or happy. This belief makes them emotionally dependent on forces outside their control. Emotional sovereignty recognizes that while circumstances may influence your emotions, you always have the final say in how you feel. You can choose to respond to challenges with curiosity instead of fear, to setbacks with determination instead of despair, to criticism with reflection instead of defensiveness. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending you don't feel them. It means choosing how to interpret and respond to those feelings. The third pillar is cognitive flexibility. Resilient people don't get trapped in rigid thinking patterns when facing adversity. They can shift perspectives, consider multiple interpretations of events, and adapt their mental models when reality doesn't match their expectations. They understand that their initial interpretation of any situation is just one possible way of understanding it, and usually not the most empowering one. Cognitive flexibility involves developing multiple frameworks for interpreting challenges. Instead of seeing failures as evidence of inadequacy, you can see them as education. Instead of viewing obstacles as problems, you can see them as strength training. Instead of interpreting criticism as attack, you can see it as feedback. The facts remain the same. but your relationship to those facts determines whether they empower or disempower you. The fourth pillar is purpose-driven thinking. When your thoughts are connected to a purpose larger than yourself, they become almost impossible to derail. People with strong sense of purpose can endure tremendous hardships because they understand that their temporary discomfort serves a meaningful goal. Their thoughts naturally organize around their mission rather than their immediate comfort. Purpose-driven thinking means regularly connecting your current challenges to your larger vision for your life. When you're facing difficult circumstances, ask yourself, how is this situation serving my ultimate purpose? What skills is this challenge helping me develop? How will overcoming this obstacle contribute to my mission? This doesn't mean pretending that difficulties are pleasant. It means finding the thread that connects your current struggle to your future success. The fifth pillar is adaptive optimism. This is not naive, positive thinking that ignores reality, but a sophisticated mental strategy that looks for realistic reasons for hope and actionable paths forward in any situation. Adaptive optimism assumes that while you cannot control what happens to you, you can always control your response. And your response will significantly influence your outcomes. Adaptive optimism involves three specific thought patterns. First, viewing setbacks as temporary rather than permanent. Instead of thinking, "This always happens to me," you think, "This is a temporary situation that will pass." Second, seeing challenges as specific rather than global. Instead of thinking, "Everything is going wrong," you think, "This particular area needs attention while other areas are going well." Third, taking appropriate responsibility without over-personalizing. Instead of thinking, "I'm a failure," you think, "I made some mistakes that I can learn from and correct." The sixth pillar is stress inoculation. Just as vaccines expose your immune system to small amounts of pathogens to build resistance, stress inoculation involves deliberately exposing your mind to manageable amounts of challenge to build mental strength. This means voluntarily putting yourself in slightly uncomfortable situations to expand your comfort zone and prove to yourself that you can handle more than you think. This could involve taking on challenging projects at work, having difficult conversations you've been avoiding, or pursuing goals that scare you. The key is choosing challenges that stretch you without overwhelming you, building your confidence in your ability to handle difficulty while expanding your capacity for future challenges. The seventh pillar is recovery and renewal. Mental resilience isn't about being constantly strong. It's about knowing how to restore your strength when it's depleted. This means developing reliable methods for renewing your mental energy, processing difficult emotions, and returning to your optimal state after periods of stress or challenge. Recovery involves both physical and mental practices. Physically, this might include adequate sleep, nutrition, exercise, and relaxation. Mentally, it might include meditation, reflection, gratitude practice, and connection with your values and purpose. The key is having a systematic approach to restoration rather than hoping you'll naturally bounce back from difficulty. Building mental resilience is like developing physical fitness. It requires consistent practice, gradual progression, and patience with the process. You don't become mentally tough by avoiding challenges. You become mentally tough by facing challenges with the right mindset and tools. Remember, mental resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about how quickly and effectively you get back up. It's about extracting maximum learning from minimum suffering. It's about maintaining your core strength even when surface circumstances are turbulent. When you build genuine mental resilience, you become practically invincible. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can stop you. External circumstances lose their power to derail your progress. or destroy your peace of mind. You become someone who thrives under pressure instead of crumbling, who grows stronger through adversity instead of being weakened by it. Chapter 11. Mastering Visualization and Mental Rehearsal for Peak Performance. Most people think visualization is just daydreaming with purpose, a feel-good exercise that might boost motivation but doesn't create real results. This misconception has relegated one of the most powerful mental technologies to the realm of wishful thinking. But elite performers in every field understand that visualization isn't fantasy, it's training. When done correctly, mental rehearsal literally rewires your brain for success and programs your nervous system to execute at levels that would be impossible without this preparation. Your brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you visualize performing an action, the same neural networks fire as when you actually perform that action. This means that mental practice creates the same neurological adaptations as physical practice. Olympic athletes who incorporate visualization into their training don't just feel more confident. They actually perform better because their brains have been programmed for success through repetitive mental rehearsal. But here's where most people go wrong with visualization. They make it passive entertainment instead of active training. They lie back, close their eyes, and watch movies in their minds where good things happen to them. This approach might feel pleasant, but it doesn't create the neurological changes that drive real-world performance improvements. Effective visualization is a disciplined mental workout that requires the same intensity and focus as physical training. You're not just imagining success, you're programming your nervous system for the specific thoughts, emotions, and actions that create success. You're rehearsing not just what you want to happen, but how you want to think, feel, and behave when it happens. The first principle of master-level visualization is specificity. Vague mental images create vague results. If you want to excel in a business presentation, you don't just imagine yourself speaking confidently. You visualize the specific room, the specific audience, the specific content you'll deliver. You rehearse handling specific questions, managing specific challenges, and navigating specific moments where things might not go according to plan. You see yourself walking into the room with a specific posture that communicates confidence. You hear yourself speaking with a specific tone that commands attention and respect. You feel the specific emotions of certainty and excitement as you deliver your message. You mentally rehearse the specific thoughts you'll use to maintain composure under pressure and the specific strategies you'll employ to connect with your audience. The second principle is emotional intensity. The brain learns most powerfully when information is combined with strong emotions. If you visualize success while feeling doubtful or indifferent, you're not programming success. You're programming mediocrity. You need to generate genuine excitement, certainty, and passion during your mental rehearsal sessions. This means connecting with the deeper meaning behind your goals. Don't just visualize achieving something. Visualize why it matters to you. Connect with the impact that success will have on your life, your family, your mission. Feel the pride of accomplishment, the joy of achievement, the satisfaction of overcoming challenges. The more emotionally real you can make the experience, the more powerfully it programs your nervous system. The third principle is repetition with variation. Just as physical skills require thousands of repetitions to master, mental skills need extensive rehearsal to become automatic. But repetition alone isn't enough. You need to practice handling different scenarios, different challenges, and different outcomes. If you're preparing for a job interview, don't just visualize the perfect interview where everything goes smoothly. Rehearse handling difficult questions, managing technical problems, dealing with unexpected interruptions. Practice maintaining your composure when things don't go according to plan. Program your mind to be flexible and adaptive, rather than rigid and dependent on perfect conditions. The fourth principle is multi-sensory engagement. The more senses you involve in your visualization, the more real it becomes to your brain. Don't just see success in your mind. Hear it, feel it, smell it, and taste it. If you're visualizing a business success, hear the sounds of celebration. Feel the texture of the success trophy or contract. Smell the environment where the achievement takes place. The fifth principle is progressive complexity. Start with simple, achievable scenarios and gradually increase the difficulty and complexity of what you're rehearsing. This builds your confidence and capabilities systematically, just like progressive physical training builds strength and endurance over time. Mental rehearsal isn't just about preparing for specific events. It's about programming your default responses to common situations. You can rehearse staying calm under pressure, thinking clearly when stressed, maintaining motivation when facing setbacks, and responding strategically instead of reactively to challenges. One of the most powerful applications of visualization is what I call identity rehearsal. Instead of just practicing specific skills or scenarios, you rehearse being the type of person who naturally excels in your chosen areas. You visualize yourself thinking like a successful entrepreneur, feeling like a confident leader, or acting like a disciplined athlete. You spend time each day mentally inhabiting the identity you want to develop. You rehearse the thought patterns, emotional states, and behavioral tendencies of your ideal self. You practice making decisions from this elevated identity, handling challenges from this empowered perspective, and approaching opportunities from this confident mindset. Another advanced technique is obstacle inoculation. This involves deliberately visualizing challenges, setbacks, and difficulties, then rehearsing how you'll handle them with grace, wisdom, and persistence. Most people avoid thinking about potential problems, but mental masters prepare for them systematically. You visualize facing rejection and maintaining your confidence. You rehearse dealing with failure and extracting valuable lessons. You practice handling criticism constructively and staying focused on your goals despite external negativity. This mental preparation makes you resilient and unshakable when real challenges arise. The key to making visualization truly powerful is understanding that you're not just imagining a better future, you're programming yourself to create that future. Every visualization session is a training session for your mind, emotions, and nervous system. You're literally sculpting your brain to support the success you want to achieve. Most people live their lives hoping that good things will happen to them. Mental masters use visualization to program themselves to make good things happen. They don't leave their success to chance. They rehearse it, practice it, and prepare for it until achieving it becomes as natural as breathing. When you master the art of mental rehearsal, you gain an enormous advantage over people who only practice in the physical world. You can train 24 hours a day without fatigue. You can perfect your performance before you ever step into the real situation. You can program success so thoroughly in your mind that failure becomes nearly impossible in reality. Chapter 12. The Psychology of Influence Through Thought Leadership. Your ability to influence others is directly proportional to your ability to control your own thoughts. Most people approach influence backwards, trying to change other people's minds while their own thinking is chaotic and unfocused. But true influence begins with mastering your own mental state, because the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your communication, and the quality of your communication determines your ability to impact others. When your thoughts are scattered, anxious, or negative, that energy transmits to everyone around you. People can sense mental chaos even when you try to hide it. Your uncertainty creates uncertainty in others. Your doubt plants doubt in their minds. Your fear generates resistance to your ideas. You cannot give what you do not possess, and you cannot influence others to think clearly when your own thinking is muddled. But when you achieve true thought mastery, something remarkable happens. Your mental clarity becomes magnetic. Your certainty becomes contagious. Your focused thinking creates focused responses in others. People naturally align with confident, clear-minded individuals because that mental state feels safe and trustworthy. This is why the most influential people in every field are masters of their own psychology first. They understand that external influence flows from internal mastery. They know that controlling the room starts with controlling your mind, that leading others begins with leading your thoughts, and that changing the world starts with changing how you think about the world. The first principle of thought-based influence is emotional state management. Your emotional state is constantly broadcasting to everyone around you, and people respond to your energy before they respond to your words. If you're trying to inspire confidence while feeling uncertain, your emotional state will undermine your message. If you're attempting to create excitement while feeling bored, your energy will generate apathy rather than enthusiasm. Master influencers learn to consciously generate the emotional states they want others to experience. If they want their audience to feel excited about an opportunity, they first generate genuine excitement within themselves. If they want people to feel confident about a decision, they access real confidence before making their case. They understand that emotions are contagious, and they strategically choose which emotions to spread. This isn't manipulation or deception. It's alignment. You're aligning your internal state with the outcome you want to create. If you believe in your message and want others to benefit from it, generating the appropriate emotional state is both authentic and strategic. The second principle is mental modeling and mirroring. People are naturally drawn to individuals who think in ways they aspire to think. When you demonstrate superior thought patterns, others unconsciously begin to adopt similar mental approaches. Your way of processing information, handling challenges, and approaching opportunities becomes a template that others naturally want to follow. This means that your thought processes become tools of influence. When you consistently demonstrate strategic thinking, others begin to think more strategically. When you model emotional intelligence, others become more emotionally intelligent in your presence. When you exhibit confidence and optimism, you elevate the mental state of everyone around you. The key is making your superior thought patterns visible through your language, questions, and responses. Instead of just thinking strategically, you verbalize your strategic thinking process so others can learn from it. Instead of just maintaining emotional control, you explain how you manage challenging emotions. You become a teacher of thinking, not just a person with good ideas. The third principle is question mastery. The questions you ask determine the direction of everyone's thinking, including your own. Master influencers understand that controlling the questions means controlling the conversation, and controlling the conversation means influencing the outcomes. Instead of making statements that people can argue with, you ask questions that guide thinking toward the conclusions you want people to reach on their own. Instead of telling someone they're wrong, you ask questions that help them discover the flaws in their reasoning. Instead of pushing your agenda, you ask questions that help people see how your proposals serve their interests. The most powerful questions are those that shift people's focus from problems to solutions, from limitations to possibilities, from past failures to future opportunities. When you consistently direct thinking toward empowering perspectives, you become someone people want to be around because you make them feel more capable and optimistic. The fourth principle is certainty without arrogance. People are influenced by confidence, but they resist arrogance. The difference lies in the source of your certainty. Arrogance comes from thinking you're better than others. True confidence comes from being certain about your values, your preparation, and your commitment to helping others succeed. When your certainty is rooted in service rather than superiority, it becomes magnetic instead of repulsive. People can sense when someone is confident because they genuinely believe in what they're offering, versus when someone is confident because they think they're superior to everyone else. This type of service-based certainty comes from mastering your thoughts about your role in other people's lives. Instead of thinking about what you can get from others, you focus on what you can give. Instead of trying to prove your worth, you concentrate on providing value. This mental shift transforms your entire approach to influence and makes it both more effective and more ethical. The fifth principle is strategic vulnerability. While confidence is important, strategic vulnerability creates deep connection and trust. This means being willing to share your struggles, failures, and uncertainties in ways that help others feel less alone in their own challenges. But this isn't about emotional dumping or seeking sympathy. It's about demonstrating that growth, learning, and success are processes that everyone goes through, including you. When people see that you've faced similar challenges and overcome them, your advice becomes more credible and your success becomes more achievable in their minds. The key is sharing your vulnerabilities in the context of growth and learning rather than as complaints or excuses. You talk about failures as education, struggles as strength training, and setbacks as setups for comebacks. This approach makes you relatable while still maintaining your credibility as someone who gets results. The sixth principle is mental momentum creation. Master influencers understand how to create psychological momentum that carries people toward desired actions and decisions. This involves structuring your communication to build agreement and excitement progressively. You start with small points of agreement and gradually work toward larger commitments. You begin with easy decisions and progress toward more significant ones. You create a series of yes moments that build psychological momentum toward the ultimate yes you're seeking. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. People naturally want to be consistent with their previous decisions and statements. When you help them make a series of aligned choices, you're making it easier for them to say yes to what will actually benefit them. The seventh principle is long-term thinking. The most powerful influence happens over time through consistent demonstration of value and integrity. Instead of trying to win every conversation or persuade every person immediately, you focus on building a reputation for clear thinking, reliable judgment, and genuine care for others' success. This long-term approach means sometimes letting people disagree with you when you know they'll discover your perspective was correct through their own experience. It means being patient with people's growth process instead of forcing immediate change. It means focusing on being right in your assessment rather than needing to be acknowledged as right in the moment. When you master these principles of thought-based influence, you become someone people naturally turn to for guidance, someone whose perspective carries weight, and someone who can create positive change without manipulation or pressure. Your influence flows from the quality of your thinking, and your thinking becomes a gift you offer to everyone around you. Chapter 13. Creating automatic success patterns through mental conditioning. The difference between people who succeed consistently and those who succeed occasionally isn't luck, talent, or circumstances. It's the difference between those who have programmed automatic success patterns into their minds and those who rely on motivation, willpower, and conscious effort for every achievement. When success becomes automatic, it's no longer dependent on how you feel, what's happening around you, or whether you remember to try hard today. Think about how you learned to drive a car. In the beginning, every action required conscious thought and deliberate effort. You had to think about checking mirrors, managing the steering wheel, coordinating the pedals, and monitoring traffic simultaneously. It was overwhelming and exhausting. But through repetition, those complex sequences became automatic. Now you can drive while having conversations, listening to music, or thinking about other things because the driving patterns have been programmed into your unconscious mind. The same principle applies to success patterns. When you consciously program the right mental and behavioral sequences, they become automatic responses that activate without conscious effort. Your brain creates success the way it creates any other habit, through repetitive practice, until the pattern becomes the default response to specific triggers. But here's what most people don't understand. Your brain is already running automatic patterns. The question isn't whether you have automatic responses. It's whether those automatic responses serve your success or sabotage it. Right now, you have automatic patterns for how you respond to challenges, how you handle opportunities, how you deal with setbacks, and how you pursue goals. The only question is whether these patterns are designed for success or failure. Most people's automatic patterns were installed randomly through past experiences, often during childhood when their brains were most impressionable. They developed automatic responses to stress, rejection, difficulty, and opportunity based on how their parents, teachers, and peers handled these situations. They're running other people's success or failure programs without ever consciously choosing what patterns they want to install. Mental conditioning for automatic success requires identifying the specific thought patterns, emotional responses, and behavioral sequences that consistently create the results you want, then programming those sequences through deliberate repetition until they become unconscious habits. The first step is pattern identification. You need to reverse engineer the mental and behavioral patterns of peak performance in your specific areas of focus. This means studying not just what successful people do, but how they think, how they feel, and how they respond to different situations. If you want to develop automatic patterns for business success, you study how successful entrepreneurs think about opportunities, how they respond to challenges, how they handle rejection, and how they make decisions under pressure. If you want automatic fitness patterns, you study how naturally fit people think about food, exercise, and their bodies. The key insight is that successful people don't rely on willpower to make good choices. They've programmed automatic patterns that make good choices feel natural and easy. They don't fight themselves to eat healthy foods. They've conditioned themselves to automatically prefer healthy options. They don't force themselves to take risks. They've programmed automatic patterns that make calculated risks feel exciting rather than terrifying. The second step is trigger identification. Every automatic pattern needs a trigger that activates it. In your current life, certain situations automatically trigger stress responses, doubt responses, or avoidance responses. You need to identify these same triggers and reprogram them to activate empowering responses instead. For example, if public speaking currently triggers automatic anxiety responses, you can reprogram that same trigger to activate confidence and excitement. If financial challenges currently trigger automatic scarcity thinking, you can reprogram that trigger to activate problem-solving and opportunity recognition patterns. The third step is repetitive conditioning. This is where most people fail, because they expect patterns to change through understanding rather than through practice. You don't create automatic patterns by thinking about them. You create them by practicing them repeatedly until they become unconscious habits. This means deliberately practicing your desired responses in low-stakes situations until they become automatic, then gradually exposing yourself to higher-stakes situations where the new patterns can be tested and strengthened. You rehearse confidence patterns when the stakes are low so they're available when the stakes are high. The conditioning process requires both mental and emotional rehearsal. You practice thinking the thoughts you want to think automatically, while generating the emotions you want to feel automatically. You rehearse the behavioral responses you want to execute automatically, while imagining the situations that will trigger these responses. The fourth step is environmental design. Your environment constantly triggers automatic responses, so you need to design your environment to trigger the patterns you want, rather than the patterns you're trying to eliminate. This includes both your physical environment and your social environment. If you want to develop automatic learning patterns, you create an environment filled with books, educational content, and learning opportunities. If you want automatic fitness patterns, you organize your environment to make healthy choices easy and unhealthy choices difficult. If you want automatic abundance patterns, you surround yourself with reminders of opportunity and prosperity rather than scarcity and limitation. Your social environment is equally important. The people you spend time with either reinforce empowering automatic patterns or destructive ones. You need to consciously choose relationships that support the mental patterns you're trying to develop and limit exposure to people who trigger patterns you're trying to eliminate. The fifth step is pattern disruption. Before you can install new automatic patterns, you often need to disrupt the old patterns that conflict with your desired responses. This means becoming conscious of your current automatic reactions and deliberately interrupting them before they can run to completion. When you catch yourself beginning to run an old pattern, you immediately stop the sequence and consciously choose a different response. Over time, this disruption weakens the old neural pathways while strengthening new ones. You're essentially rewiring your brain through conscious choice and repetitive practice. The sixth step is progressive complexity. Start by programming automatic success patterns in simple, low-pressure situations. Then gradually increase the complexity and pressure as the patterns become more established. This builds your confidence in the new patterns while giving them time to become deeply ingrained. You might start by practicing automatic confidence patterns when talking to strangers in casual settings, then progress to important business conversations, then to high-stakes presentations. Each level of success reinforces the pattern and prepares you for the next level of challenge. The seventh step is maintenance and upgrading. Automatic patterns require ongoing maintenance to remain strong and effective. This means regularly practicing your success patterns even when you don't need them, continuing to reinforce the neural pathways that create automatic positive responses. It also means upgrading your patterns as you grow and your goals evolve. The automatic patterns that serve you at one level of success may need to be enhanced or modified to serve you at the next level. Mental conditioning is an ongoing process, not a one-time achievement. When you master the art of mental conditioning, you transform from someone who has to remember to be successful into someone who can't help but be successful. Your positive responses become as automatic as your negative responses once were. Success stops being something you have to work for and becomes something that flows naturally from who you've programmed yourself to be. The most successful people in every field have learned to make excellence automatic rather than exceptional. They've programmed their minds to default to success patterns, rather than having to consciously choose success in every situation. This is the difference between those who achieve extraordinary results consistently and those who achieve them occasionally through extraordinary effort. Chapter 14. Maintaining mental mastery. In a chaotic world, mastering your mind in perfect conditions is one thing. Maintaining that mastery when everything around you is falling apart is something else entirely. The real test of thought control isn't whether you can think clearly when life is calm and predictable. It's whether you can maintain your mental discipline when the world is chaotic, when people around you are panicking, and when circumstances seem designed to destroy your peace of mind. Most people's mental mastery is fragile because it depends on favorable external conditions. They can think positively when things are going well, but their mental discipline collapses the moment they face real pressure. They can control their thoughts when they're alone and relaxed, but lose that control when they're surrounded by stress, negativity, and chaos. True mental mastery is anti-fragile. It doesn't just survive difficult conditions. It actually grows stronger under pressure. The chaos that destroys other people's mental state becomes fuel for your growth and proof of your capabilities. Instead of being victims of circumstances, you become someone who thrives, regardless of circumstances. The first principle of maintaining mental mastery in chaos is philosophical anchoring. When everything around you is changing rapidly and unpredictably, you need internal reference points that remain stable regardless of external circumstances. These philosophical anchors prevent you from being swept away by the emotional currents that chaos creates. Your philosophical anchors are core beliefs about life, success, and your own capabilities that remain true regardless of what's happening around you. These might include beliefs like, every challenge contains an opportunity. I grow stronger through adversity. I can handle whatever life presents to me. Or, this too shall pass, and I will emerge wiser from it. These aren't positive affirmations you repeat to feel better. They're bedrock principles that you've tested through experience and know to be true. When chaos strikes, you anchor yourself to these unshakable truths rather than being tossed around by temporary circumstances. The second principle is attention management in chaos. Chaos is designed to scatter your attention in multiple directions simultaneously. There are more problems than you can solve, more information than you can process, more demands than you can meet. If you try to pay attention to everything, you lose control of your mental state and become reactive rather than strategic. Master-level attention management means deliberately choosing where to focus your mental energy regardless of what's demanding your attention. You identify the few things that actually matter and give them your full focus while consciously ignoring the noise that threatens to distract you. This requires developing what I call selective mental engagement. You become highly skilled at distinguishing between what deserves your mental energy and what doesn't. You learn to ignore urgent but unimportant distractions while focusing intensely on important but not necessarily urgent priorities. The third principle is emotional regulation under pressure. Chaos generates intense emotions that can hijack your thinking if you're not prepared for them. Fear, anger, frustration, and overwhelm are natural responses to chaotic situations, but they become destructive when they control your thoughts and decisions. Emotional regulation under pressure isn't about suppressing these emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about feeling them without being controlled by them, acknowledging their presence without letting them dictate your responses. You develop the ability to experience intense emotions while maintaining clear thinking and strategic decision-making. This requires practicing emotional regulation during calm periods, so the skills are available during chaotic ones. You can't learn to control your emotions for the first time when you're under extreme pressure. You need to develop these skills through regular practice when the stakes are lower. The fourth principle is rapid perspective shifting. Chaos often creates tunnel vision, where you become so focused on immediate problems that you lose sight of the larger picture. This tunnel vision generates panic and poor decision-making because you're responding to temporary conditions as if they were permanent realities. Master-level perspective shifting means being able to instantly zoom out from immediate circumstances to see the larger timeline, the broader context, and the eventual resolution of current problems. You ask yourself questions like, how will this matter in 5 years? What opportunity might be hidden in this chaos? What am I learning that will serve me later? This isn't denial or minimizing real problems. It's maintaining the strategic perspective necessary to navigate chaos effectively. When you can see beyond immediate circumstances, you make decisions based on long-term outcomes rather than short-term comfort. The fifth principle is energy conservation and allocation. Chaos is energetically expensive. It demands more mental, emotional, and physical energy than normal circumstances. If you try to maintain the same energy expenditure patterns you use during calm periods, you'll burn out quickly and lose your ability to think clearly. Energy conservation means being extremely selective about where you invest your limited resources. You eliminate non-essential activities, delegate or postpone anything that isn't critical, and focus your energy exclusively on what will have the greatest impact on navigating the chaos successfully. This also means taking care of your basic physical needs even when it feels like you don't have time. Adequate sleep, nutrition, and exercise become even more important during chaotic periods because your body needs maximum resources to support clear thinking and emotional stability. The sixth principle is maintaining your practice during storms. The routines and practices that maintain your mental mastery during normal times become even more critical during chaotic times. But chaos has a way of disrupting the very practices you need most. This means having contingency plans for maintaining your mental disciplines even when your normal routine is impossible. If you can't do your full meditation practice, you do 5 minutes. If you can't exercise for an hour, you do 10 minutes. If you can't read for 30 minutes, you read for 5. The key is maintaining the consistency of your practice, even if you have to reduce the intensity or duration. Consistency during difficult times actually strengthens your mental discipline more than perfect practice during easy times. The seventh principle is finding opportunity within chaos. While others see only problems and threats, mental masters have trained themselves to automatically scan for opportunities that chaos creates. Economic downturns create business opportunities. Social upheavals create leadership opportunities. Personal crises create growth opportunities. This isn't about being insensitive to real problems or pretending chaos is pleasant. It's about training your mind to automatically look for ways to benefit from difficulty rather than simply being victimized by it. You develop pattern recognition that helps you spot opportunities others miss because they're too focused on what they're losing rather than what they might gain. The eighth principle is building anti-fragility. Instead of just trying to survive chaos, you use it to become stronger. Every chaotic situation becomes training for handling future chaos even better. You deliberately extract lessons, develop new capabilities, and expand your confidence in your ability to handle whatever life presents. Anti-fragility means that chaos no longer threatens your mental state, it enhances it. You become someone who gets excited about challenges because you know they're opportunities to demonstrate and develop your capabilities. You shift from hoping chaos won't happen to being prepared to benefit when it does. When you master these principles, chaos becomes your ally instead of your enemy. Other people's mental state deteriorates under pressure, while yours improves. You become the calm center that others turn to when everything is falling apart. You transform from someone who needs perfect conditions to think clearly into someone who thinks most clearly when conditions are most challenging. This is the ultimate test and proof of mental mastery. The ability to maintain control of your thoughts, emotions, and responses, regardless of what's happening around you. When you achieve this level of mastery, you become practically unstoppable because external circumstances lose their power to control your internal state. Chapter 15. Your mental transformation and the path forward. You now possess knowledge that 99% of people will never have. You understand how your mind really works, how thoughts create your reality, and how to consciously program yourself for success instead of leaving your mental state to chance. But knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. The question now is, What will you do with what you've learned? This moment is a turning point. You can close this audiobook and return to your old patterns of thinking, hoping that somehow your life will magically improve without changing how you use your mind. Or you can recognize this as the beginning of your mental transformation and commit to applying these principles until mastery becomes your new normal. Here's what you need to understand. The person you were when you started listening to this audiobook is not the same person you are now. You can't unknow what you've learned. You can't pretend that your thoughts don't matter. You can't go back to being unconscious about the most important factor in your success and happiness. You now have the responsibility that comes with this knowledge. The transformation process isn't immediate or automatic. Just because you understand how thought mastery works doesn't mean you've mastered it. Understanding is the beginning, not the end. What matters now is consistent daily application of these principles until they become as natural as breathing. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in the first week and underestimate what they can accomplish in the first year. They expect dramatic changes immediately and get discouraged when transformation takes time. But mental mastery is like physical fitness. You don't become strong by working out once. You become strong through consistent training over time. Your brain has been running its current patterns for years or decades. Those neural pathways are deeply grooved and won't change overnight. But they will change if you're consistent and patient with the process. Every day you practice conscious thought control. Those old patterns get weaker and new patterns get stronger. Start with one technique and master it before moving to the next. If you try to apply everything at once, you'll likely apply nothing effectively. Choose the principle that resonated most strongly with you, the one that addresses your biggest current challenge, and focus on it exclusively for the next 30 days. If your biggest challenge is negative thinking, focus entirely on the 4 pillars of thought mastery: awareness, interruption, redirection, and reinforcement. Practice catching negative thoughts and replacing them with empowering ones until this becomes automatic. If your biggest challenge is emotional volatility, focus on emotional thought hijacking prevention. Learn to recognize the early warning signs of emotional spirals and interrupt them before they gain momentum. If your biggest challenge is self-doubt and self-criticism, focus on defeating your inner critic. Practice recognizing the voice of limitation and refusing to engage with its arguments. Whatever you choose to focus on, commit to it completely for at least 30 days. Set reminders in your phone. Create accountability with someone who understands what you're doing. Track your progress daily. Make it impossible to forget or ignore your commitment to mental transformation. After 30 days of focused practice, you'll notice that the technique you've been practicing starts to feel natural rather than forced. Your brain will have begun creating new neural pathways that support this way of thinking. At this point, you can add a second technique while maintaining the first one. Continue this process, adding one new element of mental mastery every 30 to 60 days until you've integrated all the principles into your daily life. This might take a year or more. But remember, you're not just learning temporary techniques. You're literally rewiring your brain for lifelong success. The people around you will begin to notice changes in you before you notice them yourself. They'll comment that you seem more confident, more focused, more positive, or more resilient. They'll ask what you're doing differently. This is confirmation that your internal changes are creating external results. But the most important changes won't be visible to others. The most important changes will be internal. The growing sense that you're in control of your life rather than being controlled by circumstances. The increasing confidence in your ability to handle whatever challenges arise. And the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you're becoming the person you're meant to be. You'll notice that problems that once seemed overwhelming now feel manageable. Challenges that once created stress now generate excitement. Setbacks that once devastated you now become learning experiences that strengthen your resilience. As your mental mastery deepens, you'll also discover that you naturally become a positive influence on others. People will be drawn to your calm confidence and clear thinking. They'll seek your perspective during difficult times because they sense that you have something they want. This creates an opportunity and a responsibility. As you master your mind, you can help others master theirs. You can become a teacher and example of what's possible when someone takes control of their thoughts. You can be the proof that transformation is possible and the guide who helps others begin their own journey. But remember, you can't give what you don't have, and you can't teach what you haven't mastered. Your first responsibility is to your own transformation. Master these principles in your own life before trying to help others apply them in theirs. The path of mental mastery is not always easy, but it's always worth it. There will be days when your old patterns feel stronger than your new ones, when circumstances test your resolve, when you wonder if the effort is worth it. On those days, remember why you started this journey and recommit to the process. You started because you knew there was more potential within you than you were expressing. You started because you were tired of being controlled by circumstances, other people, and your own unconscious patterns. You started because you wanted to become the person you're capable of being. That vision of your transformed self isn't just a fantasy. It's a preview of who you become when you apply these principles consistently. Every master was once a beginner who refused to quit. Every expert was once a student who committed to the process even when it was difficult. Your mind is the most powerful tool you will ever possess. It determines everything you experience, everything you achieve, and everything you become. By mastering your thoughts, you master your life. By controlling your mind, you control your destiny. The choice is yours. You can return to unconscious thinking and hope that life works out. Or you can take control of the most important factor in your success and happiness. You can continue being a victim of random mental activity, or you can become the conscious architect of your thoughts, emotions, and results. Your transformation starts now, not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Right now, with your very next thought, you begin the journey from mental mediocrity to mental mastery. You begin the process of becoming who you were always meant to be. The person you're becoming is watching to see what you'll choose. Your future self is counting on the decision you make in this moment. Choose mastery. Choose transformation. Choose to take control of your thoughts and, through them, take control of your life. Your mind, your rules, your thoughts, your choice, your life, your creation. The power has always been yours. Now you know how to use it.